Good. Ready?
Ready.
Hello, and welcome to another session of Lessons from My Mother. Today, I'm joined by my proverbial sister, business partner, one of my closest friends here in Montreal, Reem Ghannoum, and I've been welcomed into her lovely building. As you can see from the setting, it's much better than where I live. So lovely to have you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Beautiful chimney in the background.
And so much sunlight here. So, Reem, you know the format. A couple of weeks ago, I spoke to one of our friends, Joe Chirampi. He talked a lot about his mum and about lessons that she's taught him. So, first of all, why didn't you say your mother's name?
Oh, no. We're starting with that. Okay.
What's it?
I'll start with her name. Her name is Ferian. And the meaning of her name, actually, it comes from an Arabic origin. It means strawberry. Ferian.
Tell me, what does your mum do? What is she like? Give us a bit of a feeling.
Will do. All right. So the first thing when you meet my mom in the beginning, you would think that she's a bubble of sunshine. She's blonde, contrary to me,
Wow.
naturally. And when you see her, you're like, oh, okay, I want to hang out with that person because I see a sun ray coming through that person. So that's the first impression you would get.
Yeah.
She used to work as a teacher,
Right?
with kindergarten children. So she has the patience.
It's a lot of energy and patience together.
All of that, but at the same time, she was very creative. She loved arts. She always had this passion to be an artist. She used to draw a lot, and that was something that we wanted to take from her as well, the artistic side.
Yep.
So that's the first impression you would get once you meet her.
But that's where you get it because you draw and you like music and dancing and all.
A lot of creative side
that comes from her. How wonderful! So tell me, because everybody I have interviewed will interview, when we talk about our mothers, it's a very emotional topic. It's everybody goes into history and starts remembering. When I talk about my mother, I start remembering all the things, and there's millions and millions of things. Tell us a few things that you remember. I'm sure there are thousands of lessons, but here we try to keep it to 3 or 4 lessons that you might remember from her. And then we will obviously can do another video some other time. Tell me some stories that you might remember from her, something that you took from her.
I'll start with what I mentioned in the beginning. When you first meet her, you see that sunlight coming through. And I think the first lesson I took from her, and everyone tells me that when I first meet you, you're very positive. And I tell them it's not me. I learned it from my mom. I took that from her because I recall when we were young, we had a lot of problems happening, especially that we moved a lot when we were younger. Between my home country, we moved to Dubai as well, and we lived there. So she had to handle taking a family, living abroad, and changing lifestyle on and on. And I would always see a smile on her face. When we were younger, I recall when we go to school, she would have these songs prepared for us in the car, and we would all sing along with her. And like make this energy for us to feel like, hey, you know, this is fun, this is exciting. Although we're going to school, you know, you go to school, you're like, oh, my life was horrible, you know?
She loves school.
Yeah.
Except Miguel, she loves school.
And then when I grew up, fast forward, I started to realize that she was going through a lot that could make her someone who was very negative, and yet she chose not to.
Right.
So that was the first major lesson I took from her, is that no matter what you're going through life, if you're having a lot of difficulties, you put a smile on your face. A smile goes a long way. It makes a big difference, not only for you, but for the people around you. And I took that and I maybe enhanced it a bit and applied it into my own life. And that's what I do today. I look at life with a smile and I'm like, okay, you know what? I moved here to Montreal as well. I change countries every few years. I take on chances. I'm like, okay, I can do this with the same positive mindset that she had. So I think that's the first thing that I always
that's a big risk you took coming to Montreal mid-pandemic. I think we both took this risk when you moved here. And anybody who lives in Canada knows that it's a newish country. There's a lot of challenges, a lot of immigrants. And when you come to Quebec and Montreal, there's a French language, there's a whole culture. Mid-pandemic, you're always struggling. Talk a bit more about this smiling, because what I take from what you're saying is that first you start smiling for the outside, and eventually you start smiling on the inside. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yes, 100%. That's how it works. You know, from a scientific perspective, your brain doesn't know the difference. I'm getting into my coaching side here. But your brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not. So if you and that's the term where it comes fake it till you make it. It doesn't come from faking it to the external world. It comes from you, where if you put on a bit of a smile, even if you don't feel like it, you're like, okay, I'm just gonna quote unquote fake it for now. Eventually your brain is gonna believe it. And your brain's gonna be like, hey, I feel good. Endorphins are up, I feel good about myself, I'm gonna do something better about myself. So I think that's how it works. And that's what I applied here in Montreal. And I've noticed that people here, especially young ones, come with that excitement, but then the winter hits,
gone.
It's gone. And that saying, you bring your own sunshine, is what we need to apply here. You need to bring your own sunshine by bringing.
That's a lovely saying. That's a lovely saying. Where does that come from?
You bring your own sunshine. Yeah.
You had another mom lesson?
Yes, it is.
That's a what? You bring your own sunshine.
Yes, it is. Wherever you go, take your own sunshine with you. You know, you can't rely on getting sunshine from somewhere out. You have to bring it. Especially here in Montreal. There's not much sunshine.
Yeah, this is a rare day. This just happened to be a day because I told her I'm coming over and God was kind to us and he gave us some sun. But otherwise, it's been cold and it's windy. And you're so right about, I know fake is a word that has a negative connotation, but it doesn't have to be negative. You could also say create instead of faking, because what I noticed was, I was in Turkey once, and I was walking with a few friends of mine. It was raining very heavily, very windy. It was hitting our face. And what do we do when it rains on our face? We do this.
Yeah, that's true.
We scrunch our face. And we're doing that. And when we got in, all our faces remained like this. And we were like, oh, it's horrible. And I just thought, you know what? Next time I'm not going to let the external forces influence me. So next time I went out in the rain, I kept my face as stoic and neutral as possible. And when I came inside, I was normal. And I said, well, I might have discovered something. And the same as here. When I was coming here, it was windy and cold, and I said, no, don't let the wind move you. Stay in carry. So I love that, bring your own sunshine. But also talk a bit about, I touched upon this topic because you've had, I wouldn't say only a difficult life, but you've overcome a lot of challenges in life, from Lebanon to wherever you moved, and after that, now that you're here. Talk a bit about that, because when I would say you're quite an ambitious person, you're a dreamer, you're a visionary, you want to accomplish big things in life, and a lot of it comes from that push that your mother's given. But also the world doesn't take kindly to people like that. They resist and they try to push back. Talk a bit about that.
Very true. Which takes me to another lesson that I took from her. And that lesson is more focused on maybe not a mistake, but maybe something that she was not able to accomplish. That I'm pushing myself to really get out of my comfort zone and to do that. And that's one of the reasons why I am that ambitious woman that you see today. Because culturally, we had this mindset that was more in the Arab world, and I'm sure it's also very familiar in different countries as well, where a woman is objectified into that statement where she has to be a homemaker, which is great. I want to be a homemaker myself, but also she has a certain ceiling where she's not allowed to cross when it comes down to career. And that was something that my mom ongoing would tell me, you are exactly the same as your brother. And that statement made me feel that I was very empowered. Ever since I was young, like my brother wants to play football. You want to play football? Go for it. You know, and she would tell me, you want to do something that you feel is only more or less male dominant. You go and you try to do that. And when I got into the business world, it was her voice in my head in the background that would tell me she was not able to push herself on a career level. But now I can. I learned from that mistake that she handled. So a lot of the challenges that we've been through were more career focused, where people would be like, oh yeah, you know, she's a woman, she can't do much, or she's coming from a background that is more Arab, so she's not going to be as pushing or as motivated as we want her to be. But yet I proved people wrong. And it was my mom's voice the whole time. It's like, because I'll tell you a story. My mom got married at the age of 15.
You're joking.
1 5.
Wow.
I believe that was illegal, but it wasn't. Like we did
At that
not
time.
have rules at that
Different
time that would not allow for at least minorities to get married. 15, can you imagine that? So she had to stop her education. She had to stop education. She had to stop any career ambition that she
Right.
had
Right.
and just focus on the marriage that she got into. And then she got pregnant at the age of 18. She got her first child. I'm so happy she didn't get pregnant before that. You know, I was surprised that. But still, if you think about it, like at the age of 18, you're a woman carrying your first child. You're forced into stopping your education. And then us growing up, seeing her so positive,
Yeah.
lesson number one, you're like, okay, what made you feel that positive is because will take me to lesson number 3, faith, that just popped into my head.
Sure.
But it also was because she wanted us to do better. And that was the push that she gave us, is that I couldn't do this, but you can.
Right.
And so that helped me overcome all of the challenges that I was going through in my life, whether personal, whether professional, is that I have the same capacity, the same capability as any other human being out there. And with that being said, this lesson number 2, is that her mistake, if I must say, was that she didn't fight enough to do what she wants to do.
Right.
But I can, and I will, and I am. And that's where I'm taking myself now.
And you're able to do so because of her.
100%.
We see father by standing on the shoulders of giants. That's Isaac Newton.
Love it.
And I think she is the giant whose shoulders you're standing on.
Yes.
To be able to do that. But before we move on, where did she get this from? Because 15 years old, married, 18-year-old first son, a few years later, daughter, so forth. Where did she get it from? Was her mother like this? Was her father? Or was it just circumstance? Because we grew up in the 70s and 80s in Lebanon. It's a different world.
Yeah.
Where did she get it?
I always ask myself that question.
Right.
And I always asked her, but when I was younger, I couldn't understand.
Right.
I knew that my grandparents, so if you go back in the different generations, you would see that they also had that mindset or mentality. And I don't blame them. They didn't know better. They were educated as well. That, oh yeah, you know, a woman, once she is proposed to or a husband comes forward to her, then this is it. It's time for her to go and, you know. And so her parents were not that, they didn't have that mindset that, yeah, you know, be positive and live your life to the fullest. But my mom had faith, which is the third lesson that I feel is very important too. Because ever since she was young, it's like she rests on faith. That would be her anchor. And she always used to tell me, an anchor does not do anything if you don't make sure that it's anchored. So she gave me the story when I was young, and I remember that it's like, if you're on a boat and you want to throw in the anchor, it doesn't make sense if you just throw it and you're like, oh yeah, I'm safe. Yeah. You need to make sure that it's anchored. And that for her was faith. For her, it wasn't like, oh yeah, I need to practice my faith. She was Christian, so I need to go to church and that's it. No, she was like, I am a child of God, hence I am anchored in God.
Ooh, say that once more.
So she would say that I am a child of God, so I am anchored in God. God is my anchor.
Beautiful.
And that's what kept her going on through all of this. So she would look at God not as oh yes, you know, I just need to follow my religious beliefs just for the fact that my parents did and my grandparents as well, but He is the one who will get me out of the challenges that I'm in. And when I was younger, I couldn't understand that. I'd be like, oh yeah, you know, she forced us to go to church. She would, you know, we would do all the rituals at home. I'm like, yeah, you know, it's what everyone does. And then by the age of like 16, I looked at her one time. She was crying in the bedroom. She was trying to hide whatever she was going through, but I was more aware. So I could now understand what she's going through. And I would come to her and I would tell her, like, you know, what's going on? Tell me, you know, I can, and I'm an only girl. So she would feel more comfortable to open up to me. And she would tell me, God knows best. And He answered my prayers. So it was tears of joy and not tears of sadness, to an extent where I started to understand the power of faith that kept her going.
Amazing.
And that was a major lesson for me, because I never understood that faith is more than just practicing what you've been told. Faith is something that could pull you out of deep oceans whenever you really need it. So that, I think that's how she did it.
Yeah, in Urdu we say faith is like gold. The more it is burned, the shinier it gets.
Wow.
Because the layers peel off, and the strength of a faith comes from, and there's a fire. The strength of the faith comes from the fires and difficulties and challenges that she's faced, you have faced, and it gets shinier and shinier. And when iron is burnt, it gets rid of all its impurities and it becomes steel.
Yes.
And with steel, we build everything. So it's wow. But this anchoring in God is so incredible. What's even more incredible, which I read, is that born into a Christian faith, and she has this deep sense of faith, and my mother, born in a Muslim faith, they've arrived at the same conclusion. That boggles my mind every time about the human experience, because you're reading two similar but distinct books with distinct storylines.
Yes.
But you've arrived at the same thing.
Which makes you wonder, is that, and this is something that I've always believed, because I was born and raised in Dubai. And in Dubai, if you are a child and you go to school there, especially if you go with the public or the locals, you have to study the Quran.
Right.
So when I was younger, we studied the Quran in school, and my mom taught us the Bible at home. So both, and we had a overview about both religions, because all of my family friends were Muslims, so we celebrated everything with them. And then my mom eventually also mentioned that conclusion that you're saying, is that we are both the same, we're both equal. This anchoring in God is what unites us. And I think the same happened with your mom. It's like she reached to that conclusion that it is the anchoring in God. Allah is the one. Instead of just thinking, oh yeah, my religion is this, my religion is that. Which is something I would like to mention as well on that point of faith. None of her siblings, so my mom comes from a big family, 6 children.
Whoa. Wow.
None of her siblings had 6. Her and 4 other men, so 4 men, 2 girls.
Right.
4 boys, 2 girls. And she was the only one who had that power of faith. They all seemingly were Christians, but they weren't that, rooted into faith. And I started thinking to myself, like, if, she's coming from that background, why no one else had that anchoring? And then it made sense that the more challenges she went through, the harder life was for her. And trust me, life was very tough on her, because I could tell you on and on stories about problems that she had to go through being a young woman married to a man that she doesn't really know much, and then having to build everything from scratch with him. I think the more that you are challenged in life, the more that you see the power of God. And sometimes, and that's something I tell my husband Anthony, is that sometimes I want my future children to go through challenges. I want them to face challenges in life. I don't want to bubble wrap them and protect them and be like, oh yeah, you should be safe. No, I want them to go there, because I think that's the point where they will actually see the presence of God and the presence of being anchored.
I love how you tied to faith, because Jonathan Haidt has this book, Coddling of the American Mind, which is very much like Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules of Life and Jonathan Haidt, and there's a couple of psychologists and theorists today who are talking about this bubble wrapping thing. But what I love in what you've just said is that you're not only removing the bubble wrap, but you're also injecting faith as the central principle. Not just growth as a human being, but as a way of getting closer to God. So your definition of growth is faith at the center.
Yes.
I think that's fantastic.
Definitely. And I took that from my mom.
Can't wait to meet her. She's coming. She sounds so fantastic. She sounds so fantastic. She sounds, this is what I'm getting. because I haven't met her. I've only seen pictures and videos from your ceremony and everything. But she sounds like a ball of energy. She sounds fearless. And she sounds like somebody who would do anything for her loved ones, children, relatives, friends. She would just go all out. And
She's
she,
a double-sided sword.
which is the double. I was just going to get to that, and maybe that could be a final lesson that we talk about. Because when you do all of that for everyone, what little is left in your well of love and life, you dry yourself up, pouring out.
Yeah.
Which sounded like Rumi and
Yeah.
Shams, but that's the word that I can use. Have you ever had the discussion with her, like, Mom, you do so much for everyone else. What about you? Why don't you go to the spa,
Yes.
lay in the pool? And she's like, no, no. Because my mom was a giver as well. My mom never, we can't buy a gift. I force my mother to have gifts. Here's a purse, take it. It's like, okay. Because if you say, what do you want?
Nothing. Yeah.
Whatever you want.
You be happy. Same. I think there's a side to mothers who give a lot, and this is part of motherhood.
Yeah.
I've read a lot of books lately about the instinct that a woman gets being a mother. And that instinct comes from the fact that I created that, so I give it my all. And I understand that, and I respect that so much, and I appreciate that. And I think mothers are the most powerful beings on earth. Anyone who can mother and nourish someone is very powerful. Fathers are important too, but
maybe address that later.
Are important too, but that.
I mean, I tell my father all the time, I love you to bits, but you know.
Yeah.
You know, I love you to bits, but Dad, but you know who's the.
But the thing is, and then I think that's the lesson I want to wrap this up with, is that now my mother is young. She's in her 50s. She's still very young. And she has problems in her body, health problems, chronic issues that you would expect someone in their 50s to have.
80s.
80s, maybe.
Yeah.
So if I would look back and be like, what would I do differently, or what lesson I would have learned from her, is that yes, it's great to give and to love and to protect and to be positive and all of these lessons that I took from her, but I won't do it on behalf of myself.
Yeah.
So
not at the price of your health.
Yes. And that is what pushed me to be more into well-being, more into mindfulness, mental health, physical health. That's one of the things that also attracted me to Anthony. And look at the connections. The lessons that you learn from your parents will get you to your partner.
I wish I could show him. He's very busy. I wish I could show him because I know him very well. He's like a brother to me. So when she talks about these things, I can imagine her. Yeah, it fits. But for people who haven't seen him, maybe I'll show a picture of him somewhere.
Eventually, we'll go into more details about this.
I'll tell you a bit about Anthony. He's a big, strong giant of a man, and his heart is even bigger than his physical attribute because he's a giver, he's a lover, he's a protector, and he's also a man of faith. He jokes around, and he's also serious, and he's dedicated and committed, and I love him like a younger brother. So if that paints a picture.
To get an idea, but the reason that I mention him is because, and I think that's the lesson that hit me after I got married.
Right.
Is that you choose your partner based on the lessons that you took from your parents. So this is what happens, whether you admit it, whether you don't know about it, whether you're aware. The choice of whoever you're going to be with is solely based on what you learned from your parents. If you worked on yourself, if you developed yourself to detach from all mistakes that your parents did and learn from them, then you're going to choose the right partner. But if you don't do that, you're going to end up repeating the same pattern that your parents did.
It's called a generational something, right?
Yes. Generational traumas go down from parents to children to their children. And I think that's the main summary of all the lessons that I took, is that I learned that from my mom. Good lessons that could help me improve myself. I worked on myself, and I'm like, okay, I'm choosing a partner that will help me be better, but also a partner that will align with the vision that I have to myself outside of what I took from my parents. And that's why you see me, I mention Anthony. Because when I talk about my mom, I cannot but talk about Anthony and me, because now they're intertwined for me. And so that lesson to go back to the lesson that I took from her, is that take care of others, be there for them, do what you can for them, but you also have to be strong enough to maintain yourself.
Yep.
And that's where I learned more about taking care of myself, doing more self-care, and I learned that a lot also from Anthony.
Yeah, and it's not just physical self-care, it's
everything.
Lots of mental and a lot of spiritual self-care.
Yes.
So mindfulness and wakefulness and being aware
Mind, body, soul.
Yeah,
all
of it.
Together.
Yeah.
So that's it. Now, once you meet my mom, you're gonna see.
I can't wait to meet you, mom. So
you're gonna see everything we spoke about, but then you're gonna be like,
no, I can't wait to get to know her so much better and learn so much from her. Before we go, I'd love for you to say something for your mother
yes.
in whichever language you choose, Arabic or English, or if you understand French. But please say something for your mother before we sign.
Definitely, I will. I'm going to say it in my native language, which is Arabic. And in Arabic, we have different dialects. So we speak the Lebanese dialect. So whoever is watching this is going to understand if you speak the Lebanese dialect. I call her mom or mummy. So mummy is when you're like, you feel that intimacy with her.
My father called his mother.
Really?
Yeah.
Mothers, man, you're choosing to speak about the most sensitive topic.
I'm writing a book about this. This is going to be amazing. Oh, you're going to go.
Okay, mom. كل شيء عملتيه بحياتك وصلني للي أنا فيه اليوم، بس بدي إياك تعرفي إنه من اليوم وبالرايح صار وقتك أنت. هلا كل تركيزنا كله رح يكون عليكي، على إنه أنت تتحسني أكثر، تهتمي بحالك أكثر، ونحن كلنا حدك وكلنا بنحبك. Love you so much. I'm here for you, and I can't wait for you to come here. Yes.
Thank you so much, my loveliest sister in Montreal. We're going to stop here. You can stop your phone as well. Thank you so much for joining us for another session of Lessons from My Mother. See you next week, hopefully from England. Take care. Bye-bye. Stopping mine. You can stop your